Chapter 1. Shadows of the Past. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the dimly lit alley as Louis gritted his teeth, his hand tightening on the hilt of his sword. He was chasing the elusive Phantom Killer, a name whispered in fear across the capital. The commander of the Second Chief of Guards never failed a mission, and he wasn't about to start now. However, tonight was different. A strange unease coiled in his stomach, not from the danger ahead, but from something far more personal. The killer slipped into the shadows of the marketplace, and Louis followed, his heartbeat quickening. Just as he was about to turn a corner, a wave of dizziness hit him, forcing him to halt. He stumbled, pressing a hand against a nearby wall, his breath coming in shallow gasps. "What is wrong with me?" he muttered, frustration evident in his voice. For weeks his body had been acting strangely, morning nausea, a heightened sensitivity to smells, and now this unbearable fatigue. He had dismissed it as stress from the investigation, but deep down he knew something was wrong. Flashback, the palace ball. The scene shifted in his mind to 4 months ago, to the opulent palace ball. The air had been filled with music, laughter, and the clinking of crystal goblets. Louis, ever the dutiful commander, had attended reluctantly, more interested in watching for potential threats than mingling. He remembered a drink, golden and sweet, handed to him by a servant with a knowing smile. The details blurred after that. A warm touch, whispered words, and a night he couldn't quite piece together. When he awoke the next morning, he was in his chambers, his uniform neatly folded on a nearby chair. No note, no explanation. Just a lingering scent of something familiar yet unplaceable. Present day, a shocking revelation. The dizziness subsided, and Louis pushed himself forward, determined to catch the killer. Hours later, back at the guard's headquarters, a lingering thought prompted him to visit the royal physician. "Commander Louis," the physician greeted him with a mix of surprise and concern. "You look pale. What brings you here?" "I've been feeling off," Louis admitted reluctantly. "Dizzy spells, nausea. Just tell me it's exhaustion so I can move on." The physician conducted a thorough examination, his expression growing more incredulous by the minute. Finally, he stepped back, clearing his throat awkwardly. "Commander Shinar, you're 4 months pregnant." The word struck Louis like a physical blow. "What? That's impossible," he protested, his voice trembling. "I assure you the signs are unmistakable," the physician said gently. "Have you experienced intimacy in the past few months?" Louis's mind reeled, flashing back to the palace ball and the blank spaces in his memory. His stomach twisted as the implications set in. "I don't remember," he whispered, his hand unconsciously resting on his abdomen. The revelation was overwhelming, but Louis quickly resolved to keep it hidden. As a commander, he had enemies, and any sign of vulnerability could be dangerous, not just for him, but for the life growing inside him. Returning to his chambers that night, Louis stared at his reflection in the mirror. His hand hovered over his abdomen, as if the truth might change by sheer will. "I'll figure this out," he murmured to himself, a mixture of fear and determination in his eyes. "But no one can know, not even the Emperor." Little did he know, the Emperor already knew, and had been quietly watching over him all along. Chapter 2. Secrets Beneath the Crown. The rising sun painted the capital in hues of gold, but Louis couldn't appreciate its beauty. He was consumed by thoughts of the secret he now carried. With each passing day, the weight of his condition pressed harder on his shoulders. As he donned his uniform, carefully adjusting the layers to hide any potential signs, his mind wandered to the Emperor. Adrian had always been a figure of authority and mystery in Louis's life, a man of quiet power, admired by all. Lately, however, Adrian had become unusually attentive, making subtle but deliberate efforts to involve himself in Louis's affairs. It was unsettling, to say the least. At the morning council, Louis stood rigid, presenting updates on the Phantom Killer case. Adrian sat at the head of the room, his piercing gaze fixed on Louis. "The killer has left no trace in the last week," Louis reported. "But we believe he may be hiding in the lower district. My team is planning a raid tonight." Adrian leaned forward, his tone calm yet firm. "Commander Louis, you've been working tirelessly. Perhaps you should let someone else lead this mission." Louis stiffened, his pride bristling. "Your Majesty, I am more than capable of handling this." "I have no doubt of your capabilities," Adrian replied, his voice softening, "but even the strongest need rest." The words lingered, tinged with something more, something personal. Louis felt his pulse quicken under the Emperor's gaze, but quickly dismissed it as paranoia. Later that day, Louis stood in the training grounds, supervising his men. His second-in-command, Captain Alric, approached him. "Commander, you've been pushing yourself harder than usual," Alric observed. "Is something troubling you?" Louis shook his head, masking his unease. "Focus on the mission, Captain. We can't afford distractions." But as the day wore on, Louis couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that Adrian's concern wasn't mere formality. The Emperor's behavior, his subtle glances, his timely interventions, seemed too deliberate to be coincidental. That evening, Louis returned to his quarters to find a tray of food waiting for him. The note beside it read, "You must take care of yourself. Your health is paramount. Adrian." He stared at the elegant handwriting, his emotions a tangled mess of confusion and suspicion. Was Adrian watching him? How much did he know? As he sat down, the faint sound of footsteps echoed outside his door. Acting on instinct, Louis swung the door open, only to find Adrian himself standing there. "Your Majesty?" Louis said, startled. Adrian smiled, his usual composed demeanor softening. "I thought I might check on you personally." Louis's instincts screamed to keep his guard up, but there was something disarming about Adrian's presence. "I assure you I'm fine," Louis replied curtly. Adrian stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "You've always been independent, Louis, but even the strongest need someone to lean on." The word struck a chord, but Louis quickly masked his emotions. "With all due respect, Your Majesty, I'm perfectly capable of handling myself." Adrian studied him for a moment before nodding. "Very well. But know that I'm here, should you ever need me." As Adrian turned to leave, Louis couldn't help but wonder, was the Emperor truly just being kind, or was there more to his actions than met the eye? The raid. Determined to distract himself, Louis led the raid on the lower district that night. The operation was swift and precise, resulting in the capture of one of the Phantom Killer's accomplices. But as Louis interrogated the criminal, a sharp pain shot through his abdomen. He clenched his jaw, refusing to show weakness. Yet the pain was a stark reminder of the life he carried, and the lengths he would need to go to protect it. Unbeknownst to him, Adrian had sent one of his personal guards to shadow Louis during the raid, ensuring his safety. As the night wore on, Adrian stood on the palace balcony, gazing out at the city. His thoughts were consumed by Louis, the man who had unknowingly captured his heart years ago. Adrian's hand rested on a folded piece of parchment on the table, a report from the royal physician. Confirmed what he had suspected since the ball. Louis was carrying his child. "I'll protect you," Adrian whispered to the night. "Even if you don't know it yet, Louis. You are my everything." Chapter 3. Clues and Confessions. The days that followed the raid were a blur of activity and hidden turmoil for Louis. The captured accomplice of the Phantom Killer had revealed vital information, narrowing the search. Yet, even as Louis immersed himself in the case, the weight of his secret loomed over him. The Emperor's continued attention didn't help. Adrian's every gesture, be it a word of encouragement, a subtle glance, or a simple gesture of kindness, felt deliberate, as though he knew something Louis was trying desperately to conceal. "Commander," Captain Alric called, rushing into Louis's office with a scroll in hand. The accomplice talked. "The killer's been hiding in the abandoned warehouse district on the outskirts of the capital." Louis nodded, rising from his desk. "Prepare the men, we move tonight." As the preparations were underway, a messenger from the palace arrived, bearing a letter from Adrian. "Commander Louis, I've heard of your latest lead. While I trust in your abilities, I urge you to proceed with caution. The capital cannot afford to lose someone as invaluable as you. Adrian." Louis frowned, his hand gripping the letter tightly. The Emperor's words were always layered with meaning, but this time they felt almost too personal. As the raid began, the guards infiltrated the warehouse district under the cover of night. Louis led the charge, his sword gleaming in the moonlight. The operation was tense but efficient, culminating in the capture of the Phantom Killer. However, as the guards celebrated their victory, Louis's vision blurred, and a wave of dizziness overcame him. He staggered but caught himself against a nearby wall, masking his discomfort from the others. "Commander, are you all right?" Alric asked, concern etched on his face. "I'm fine," Louis replied curtly, straightening himself. "Focus on securing the prisoner." Unbeknownst to him, Adrian had been watching from the shadows. Dressed in a dark cloak, the Emperor had followed the raid in secret, ensuring Louis's safety. When he saw Louis falter, his heart clenched, but he held back, knowing that Louis would not appreciate his interference, at least not yet. The next morning, Louis was summoned to the palace. He entered Adrian's study, his posture stiff and formal. "You summoned me, Your Majesty?" Louis asked, his voice even. Adrian looked up from his desk, his expression unreadable. "You led your men well last night. The capital owes you its gratitude." "It was my duty," Louis replied curtly. Adrian rose from his chair and approached Louis, his piercing gaze making it impossible to look away. "You've always carried the weight of your duty alone, Louis. But you don't have to. Not anymore." Louis's breath hitched at the intensity of Adrian's words. "What are you trying to say?" For a moment, the silence between them was palpable. Then Adrian stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You're not alone, Louis. I know your secret." Louis's eyes widened, his heart pounding in his chest. What are you talking about?" Adrian's gaze softened, yet it held an unyielding determination. "The night of the palace ball? It wasn't just a dream. I was the one who was with you." Louis staggered back, his mind reeling. "That's impossible. I don't remember." "I didn't mean for it to happen the way it did," Adrian admitted, his voice laced with regret. "But when I saw you that night, I couldn't hold back any longer. I've loved you since we were at the Royal Academy, Louis. And when I found out you were carrying my child, I vowed to protect you, even from a distance." Louis's world tilted as the truth unraveled before him. "You knew this whole time?" Adrian nodded, his expression earnest. "I've been watching over you, trying to give you the space you need. But I can't stay silent any longer. You and our child mean everything to me." Louis's emotions were a chaotic storm of anger, confusion, and something he couldn't quite name. He wanted to lash out at Adrian for keeping the truth from him, but he also couldn't ignore the sincerity in the Emperor's eyes. "I don't know what to say," Louis admitted, his voice trembling. "You don't have to say anything now," Adrian replied gently. "Just know that I'm here for you no matter what. You're not alone in this." As Louis left the study, his mind raced with questions. Could he trust Adrian? Could he forgive him? And most importantly, could he accept the love that Adrian so clearly offered? Chapter 4. The Emperor's Truth. The revelation of Adrian's love and his role in the events of the palace ball weighed heavily on Louis. Days passed, yet he found himself unable to confront his emotions. He kept his distance from the Emperor, focusing instead on his duties and his growing child. However, Adrian was not a man to be deterred. His patience was infinite, his actions deliberate. Every day, subtle gestures reminded Louis of the Emperor's unwavering presence. A carefully selected meal delivered to his quarters, a warm cloak on a cold morning, and quiet moments when their eyes met across the council chambers. Louis couldn't deny it anymore. Adrian truly cared, but care wasn't enough to erase the confusion and doubt in his heart. One morning, as Louis prepared to leave for the training grounds, a knock sounded at his door. He opened it to find Adrian standing there, dressed in simple yet elegant attire. "Your Majesty," Louis greeted stiffly, bowing. Adrian raised a hand, stopping him. "No formalities, Louis. I came to see how you're doing." "I'm fine," Louis replied automatically, though his fatigue and unease were evident. Adrian stepped closer, his voice soft. "You don't have to be fine all the time, Louis. You can lean on me." Louis hesitated, his usual defenses wavering, under Adrian's gentle gaze. "Why are you doing this? Why do you care so much?" Adrian's lips curved into a faint smile. "Because you're important to me. You always have been." The sincerity in his tone left Louis speechless. Before he could respond, Adrian continued, "Take a walk with me. There's something I want to show you." Adrian led Louis to the royal gardens, where they had spent many afternoons during their academy days. The lush greenery and vibrant flowers brought back a flood of memories, of laughter, camaraderie, and a bond Louis had once shared with Adrian before their roles as commander and emperor had created distance between them. "I've loved you since we were young," Adrian confessed, his tone steady. "But I never knew how to tell you. When I became emperor, my responsibilities grew, and I thought I had lost my chance. Louis listened in silence, his heart conflicted. That night at the ball, Adrian continued, I thought it was finally my moment to be with you. But when I realized you didn't remember, I didn't know how to approach you. I didn't want to force anything. Adrian stopped walking, turning to face Louis. But now I won't stay silent. I want to be part of your life, Louis. Yours and the child's. Louis looked away, his emotions swirling. It's not that simple, Your Majesty. I don't even know how to feel about this. About you. Adrian stepped closer, his voice unwavering. Then let me show you, Louis. Let me prove that my love for you is real. That evening, Louis found himself reflecting on Adrian's words. He touched his abdomen, feeling the faint movements of the life within. The child was a constant reminder of the connection he now shared with Adrian. A connection he couldn't ignore, no matter how much he wanted to. For the first time, he allowed himself to wonder, could he let Adrian in? The next day, during a quiet moment in the royal chambers, Adrian found Louis staring out the window, lost in thought. Louis, Adrian said softly, stepping into the room. Louis turned to face him, his expression unreadable. Your Majesty, why me? With all the people in the kingdom, why do you care so much about someone like me? Adrian's gaze was steady. Because you're not just someone, Louis. You're brave, loyal, and kind. You see the world differently than anyone else, and that's what I love about you. Adrian took a step closer, his hand hovering near Louis's but not touching. I know I've made mistakes. I should have been honest with you from the start. But I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you, if you'll let me. Louis's walls began to crack, his voice trembling as he replied, I don't know if I'm ready to forgive you. But I don't want to keep fighting this. Adrian smiled, his eyes shining with hope. That's all I ask, Louis. Just give me a chance. As the days passed, Louis found himself opening up to Adrian. They spent more time together, reminiscing about their shared past and discussing their future. Slowly but surely, Louis began to see the emperor not as the distant ruler, but as the man who had always cared for him. And as the bond between them grew, so did Louis's hope that perhaps, just perhaps, they could build a life together, one filled with love, trust, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Chapter 5. Journey to Acceptance. The morning sun filtered through the grand windows of the palace, casting a warm glow on the marble floors. Louis stood in the training grounds, observing his men as they practiced. His mind, however, wasn't on their movements. It was on the emperor. Adrian's confessions and persistent care had left Louis in a whirlwind of emotions. Though he wasn't ready to admit it aloud, his walls were slowly crumbling. Adrian's love was genuine, and despite his initial anger, Louis found himself drawn to the man he had known for so long. Later that evening, Adrian invited Louis to dine with him in a private chamber. The table was modest compared to the grand feasts of the court, with just a few carefully prepared dishes. I thought we could have a quiet meal, Adrian said, gesturing for Louis to sit. Louis hesitated before taking the offered seat. You didn't need to go through the trouble, Your Majesty. Adrian, the emperor corrected gently, a small smile on his lips. When it's just the two of us. Call me Adrian. Louis nodded awkwardly, focusing on the food before him. The meal was delicious, yet the silence between them felt heavy with unspoken words. Are you always this formal, even when you're not working? Adrian teased lightly, breaking the tension. Louis's lips twitched, the faintest hint of a smile appearing. Habit, I suppose. It's hard to separate myself from my duties. Adrian's expression softened. You don't always have to be the commander, Louis. You're allowed to just be yourself. The words struck a chord, and for the first time in weeks, Louis felt a flicker of ease in Adrian's presence. As the meal ended, Adrian reached across the table, his hand brushing against Louis's. Louis, I meant what I said. I'll wait for as long as it takes, but I want you to know I'm here. Always. Louis looked at Adrian, his heart pounding. There was no denying the sincerity in the emperor's eyes, nor the warmth that radiated from his touch. I'm not sure I know how to let someone in, Louis admitted quietly. Adrian smiled gently. Then let me show you how, one step at a time. That night, Louis lay in his chambers, his hand resting on his abdomen. The child within him had grown more active recently, a constant reminder of the life he was now responsible for. As he drifted off to sleep, a sudden gentle flutter startled him awake. His eyes widened as he realized what it was. The baby's first kick. A mix of emotions washed over him. Joy, awe, and a touch of fear. For the first time, the reality of his situation felt tangible, and it brought with it a newfound determination to protect the child and find clarity in his relationship with Adrian. The next day, Louis was summoned to the royal gardens. When he arrived, he found Adrian waiting for him, a small box in his hands. "What's this?" Louis asked, eyeing the box suspiciously. "A gift," Adrian said, handing it to him. Louis opened the box to reveal a finely crafted necklace with a small, intricately designed pendant. Inside the pendant was a tiny engraving of the royal crest entwined with the symbol of the guards, a mark of their shared connection. "It's beautiful," Louis murmured, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Adrian stepped closer, his voice low. "It's a reminder that you're not alone, Louis. No matter where you are, no matter what happens, I'll always be by your side." Louis's throat tightened, and for the first time he allowed himself to hope that Adrian's promises were more than just words. As the days turned into weeks, Louis found himself growing more comfortable in Adrian's presence. The Emperor's patience, kindness, and unwavering love slowly began to chip away at the walls Louis had built around his heart. One evening, as they walked together in the gardens, Louis finally spoke the words he had been holding back. "Adrian, I'm scared," he admitted, "but I want to try, for the child and for us." Adrian stopped, his eyes lighting up with a mix of relief and joy. "Louis, you have no idea how much that means to me." He took Louis's hand in his, holding it gently. "We'll take it one step at a time together." Louis nodded, a small but genuine smile on his lips. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of peace, a feeling that, with Adrian by his side, he could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Chapter 6. A New Life Begins. The final months of Louis's pregnancy were a whirlwind of emotions and changes. With Adrian's unwavering support, Louis had grown accustomed to the idea of sharing his life with the Emperor. Though their relationship was still a work in progress, the bond between them had deepened with every passing day. The palace buzzed with quiet anticipation. Adrian had discreetly ensured that only the most trusted members of the court knew about Louis's condition, guarding his privacy with a vigilance that left no room for error. And now, as the first signs of labor began, the world seemed to hold its breath. Louis clutched the edge of the bed, breathing through the sharp pains rippling through his body. The royal physician and a small team of attendants worked swiftly, offering reassurances as they prepared for the child's arrival. Adrian stayed by Louis's side, his hand steady and firm as he held Louis's. His normally composed demeanor was replaced with a mix of concern and awe. "You're doing amazing, Louis," Adrian whispered, his voice a soothing anchor in the chaos. Louis glared at him through the pain. "If I survive this, you owe me more than a few favors." Adrian chuckled softly, brushing a damp strand of hair from Louis's forehead. "Anything you want, just name it." Hours passed, each moment stretching into eternity. Finally, the room filled with the sound of a newborn's first cry, a tiny, powerful sound that brought tears to Adrian's eyes and a wave of relief to Louis. "It's a boy," the physician announced, carefully placing the baby in Louis's arms. Louis stared down at the small, wriggling bundle in his arms. The baby's eyes fluttered open briefly, revealing a striking shade of green, a perfect mix of Adrian's and Louis's features. "He's beautiful," Adrian murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Louis nodded, his exhaustion giving way to a deep, indescribable joy. "He's perfect." Adrian leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to Louis's temple. "You're incredible, Louis. Both of you." As the days passed, the palace adjusted to the presence of its newest member. Adrian was a doting father, often sneaking away from his royal duties to spend time with Louis and their son. Louis too found himself softening in ways he hadn't expected. The child, whom they named Theo, became the center of his world, and Adrian's steadfast love made it impossible for Louis to remain guarded. One evening, as they sat together in the nursery, Theo sleeping peacefully in his crib, Adrian turned to Louis with a serious expression. "Louis," he began, taking Louis's hand in his, "I know I've said this before, but I want you to know how much you mean to me. You've given me a family, a future I never thought I'd have. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving how much I love you. Louis's heart swelled, his usual reticence giving way to the emotions he had been holding back. Adrian, I never thought I'd say this, but I love you too. You've been patient and kind, even when I didn't deserve it. And I want us, to work. Adrian's smile was radiant, his eyes shining with happiness. You have no idea how long I've waited to hear that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a simple yet elegant ring. Louis, will you marry me? Tears welled in Louis's eyes as he nodded. Yes, I will. The announcement of their engagement was met with joy and celebration throughout the kingdom. The wedding, though a grand affair, felt intimate and personal, a testament to the love that had grown between them. As they stood together, hand in hand, watching Theo giggle in the arms of a nursemaid, Adrian leaned close to Louis. This is just the beginning, Adrian said softly. Our story's far from over. Louis smiled, his heart full. No, it's not, but whatever comes next, we'll face it together. And for the first time in his life, Louis felt truly at peace. Epilogue: The Heart of the Kingdom and the Legacy of Love. Years passed in the kingdom, and life moved forward with its endless rhythm. Louis and Adrian, now bound not only by duty but also by their unwavering love, continued to serve the kingdom with equal parts of passion and devotion. Their lives were no longer just shaped by royal obligations. They were now defined by family, the laughter of their child, and the love they had for each other. Theo, their now 6-year-old son, was the light of their lives. His wide, curious eyes reflected his mother's intensity and his father's quiet wisdom. Already his mischievous nature had earned him a reputation in the palace, though he was always surrounded by the doting care of his parents. Louis often found himself laughing at the antics of his son, who had an uncanny ability to slip past even the sharpest guards. Yet when it mattered, Theo showed a natural understanding of responsibility that made Adrian proud. It was clear to both of them that their son would one day play an important role in the kingdom, just as they had. Though they were busy with their duties, Louis and Adrian always made time for Theo. Every evening they took him on long walks through the gardens, letting him ask endless questions about the world. At night they tucked him into bed, telling stories of grand adventures, always ending with, "And they lived happily ever after." Despite the personal joys of fatherhood, Louis and Adrian had never let their responsibilities slip. The empire had grown prosperous under their rule, but there were always matters of state to attend to, and the kingdom's safety was ever at risk. Louis had resumed his duties as the commander of the guards, his skill and determination unshaken. He worked alongside Adrian, who balanced his role as the emperor with the needs of his family. They were partners, not just in life, but in leadership. Their family's bond had only strengthened their resolve. Even as they stood before councils or addressed the kingdom's subjects, their love for each other remained at the core of all they did. Yet in the midst of their busy lives, their time together remained sacred. Late at night, when the day's work was done, Adrian and Louis would sit together in the study, talking quietly, their fingers intertwined. Theo's laughter echoed through the halls, reminding them that their world, while vast, was still home. A new addition to the family. On one cool autumn morning, as the leaves outside the palace turned golden, a new chapter of their lives began. Adrian paced nervously in the royal chambers, his hand resting on Louis's back as he stood beside the bed. They found out months ago that Louis was pregnant again with their second child, which made both of their hearts swell with joy and happiness. Louis, however already a father, felt a familiar flutter of nervousness, though it was nothing compared to his first pregnancy. With Theo, they had navigated the unknown together, but this time they had a little more experience and a lot more love to give. Finally, after hours of waiting, the cries of their second child echoed through the chambers. Adrian's breath caught in his throat as Louis held their newborn daughter in his arms, her tiny hands clutching onto his fingers. "She's beautiful," Louis whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Adrian gazed at their daughter, his eyes brimming with love. "Our family's complete," he murmured. They named her Leora, meaning my light, a name befitting the tiny girl who would brighten their world. Theo, thrilled to become an older brother, insisted on holding her, though Louis and Adrian kept a careful watch. As the days passed, the palace was filled with joy. Theo quickly took to his new role as protector and playmate, often trying to show Leora how to play with the toys they had once enjoyed. Louis, always the protector, made sure to keep his children close, even as he returned to his duties as the commander. Adrian, too, found himself torn between his love for his family and the demands of his reign, but he knew now, more than ever, that his greatest duty was to Louis and their children, a family united. It was during one of their family walks through the palace gardens that Louis realized how much their lives had changed. Theo ran ahead, his laughter ringing through the air, while Leora giggled in her father's arms. Adrian walked beside him, his eyes soft with contentment. They had once lived their lives with uncertainty, driven by duty and survival, but now they had something they had never imagined: peace. A peace rooted in love, family, and the unshakable bond they had formed over the years. As the family stood together in the sunlight, Adrian placed his hand over Louis's, the warmth between them a reminder of all they had been through and all they had yet to experience. "We've come a long way," Adrian said softly. Louis smiled, his heart full. "Yes, we have. And I wouldn't trade a single moment of it." As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the land, Louis and Adrian knew they had found their happily ever after, not just for themselves, but for their children and the kingdom they would one day inherit. Together they had built something unbreakable, a family united in love, trust, and the promise of a bright future.